Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for our client retainer management webinar. We're really excited to get started. We're just at the top of the hour, but I still see some people trickling in, so we'll just give the 1-minute warning. And yeah, we'll be chatting with you all soon.
Hey Sophia, not to psych you out. I didn't know that today was June 29th.
Thanks, Jimmy. I'm really glad that we've already found a flaw in my presentation today. All right, well, on that note, we are now officially at 2 minutes past the top of the hour, so why don't we get started? Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me. You can tell that obviously yesterday, as I was updating my slides, I still thought it was June. Um, I don't know about everyone else, but I hope everyone is out there in a safe, cozy space, with everything going on in the world and also losing track of time like I am. So today we're going to be talking about client retainer management. I know that this is a huge topic that we all tend to discuss one-on-one, and it's really a great opportunity for all of us to come together and talk about some of our best practices within Function Point, as well as just within business in general on how to maintain our retainers. So for us today, obviously, my name is Sophia Wilson. I'm the manager of customer experience here at Function Point. I've been with the company just over 6 years, coming on 7, and had the pleasure of working with quite a few of you, and working directly with agencies and what they need in their retainers and best practices that they have come up with. Joining me is Jimmy Wu, our Director of Sales and Marketing. Jimmy's been with the company also for quite a few years as well, and him and I tend to bounce a lot of ideas off of each other when it comes to a lot of these things. So for our agenda today, I'm going to make sure that what we're going to do is actually what is a client retainer. So let's discuss that. We're going to define it together. We have a lot of agencies that come and chat with us about retainers that they have, and in the end, a lot of them aren't really retainers. So let's actually define that together. And obviously, if you have questions on what you think your retainers are, our teams are always here to work with you to help set that up. When to use a retainer. So when are the best possible times to use retainers? This is always a great question. Again, it's by utilizing even Function Point to understand the profitability of your retainers and if it still makes sense for you to continue using them or even to transition into a retainer based off of work with some of your clients. So these are always really important questions. Then we're going to get into the actual use of Function Point when it comes to retainers. So again, based off of what is a retainer, when you're going to use it, we're going to discuss the difference between a robust and a simple one and how we can actually set those up in Function Point for you to make it for ease of use. And then of course with that, obviously that making it easier for your usage of those retainers, we're then going to discuss reporting within the FP for it. Obviously, you're going to want to stay on top of it so that, again, you continue to understand your profitability and if these are still important things for you to have in your repertoire. So with that, let's just get straight into it. What is a client retainer? So I'm sure a lot of you probably have Googled this. I know I did way back when I first started, but what is a client retainer? A client retainer is a reoccurring payment, typically monthly. However, I've worked with a lot of agencies that have quarterly or annual ones, but they tend to be monthly. And then this is paid for repeatable work or defined within a scope. So within that, we have lots of retainers where someone may have, again, repeatable work. Could be something simple like SEO. You always know you're going to work X number of hours on SEO work for your client every single month. But there are always times as well, I know that even we've been in retainers where, we have X number of hours that we can use per month, but it could be used towards absolutely anything. Could be blog writing, could be website design. So it really is completely up to you and your agreement with your client. But usually, again, it is a set number of hours that have been somewhat defined. Now, what it is not, which I think is also a really important thing for us to remember, is just an amount paid up front for work without set parameters. So this is something else that I've worked with some agencies in the past where, quite a few of them maybe work with the government. And so there is a large sum that is provided to the agency at the start of the year, maybe 100 grand, for example, that then is just expected to be chipped away at throughout the year. This would be more along the lines of a deposit that would be put into a liability account and not necessarily a retainer, because in retainer, what you're going to do is actually recognize those fees right away, and you would be able to recognize it as income. So those are important things to really think about when you're thinking about some of those payments that are upfront. How are they actually going to be recognized in your invoicing? So now we're going to get into some of those client retainer best practices. So for me, and if any of you on the line have ever spoken to me, I'm a huge advocate for keep it simple. And this is really a best practice throughout the entire system. The simpler you can keep things, the easier it's going to be for you to be able to work through them, as well as, of course, find what you need. If you start getting too micromanagey or into the details, sometimes it comes back to bite you in the butt later. Set expectations. So this, again, with those retainers, I know that a lot of agencies, especially when they're first starting out, they're really excited about some of these retainers that they can get their hands on. So they'll just agree to whatever the client is asking for. Now, this can, again, come back and be a bit of a pain because no expectations have been set around what kind of work you're going to be doing, maybe even the number of hours you're going to be providing. And of course, a huge thing, if they go over those hours, is there anything that needs to be paid above and beyond that? It's really important for you to sit down, have that conversation, and define those expectations around the work that you are going to be providing, and what your client can expect in regards to turnaround time. And again, if things are to go above and beyond what your agreement is. So again, really important things to make sure that we are setting when you enter into a retainer type relationship. And then, of course, and again, anyone that has talked to me in the past, think about that end goal. Anytime that we are setting up any of our jobs or work within Function Point especially, think about your reporting and invoicing, because in the end, that is such a key part of your workflow and your business processes. You're going to want to make sure that you get paid and that you can see, again, that profitability on this work, and if it continues to make sense to have it as work for yourself and have that agreement with the client. You do always have that power at the end of a retainer agreement to redefine it and reset those expectations every single year. So never forget that you have that capability. Now what I really want to define is, again, those different types of retainers. And when we are done kind of walking through this, then we're going to get into how we can actually set those up in Function Point and how that's going to look for yourselves later on. So the different type of retainer models that we have, of course, is robust, which is probably the biggest one that we really work with a lot of agencies on to set them up properly. There's usually quite a few questions around it. So robust would be a set payment amount that could include multiple undefined deliverables. Something that I always kind of use to explain this, and again, we're going to get into some examples, so don't worry if maybe you're more of a visual learner. But within this, again, it could be a 70 hours that is paid upfront for at the start of the month. However, every single deliverable underneath that isn't necessarily defined. It's just that, you know, they're going to call when they need something, could be a blog post, and you'll be able to chip away at those hours for yourself. Or again, website design, SEO, and you will actually track each of those deliverables separate from what your payment is. And again, we're going to show you that setup. Next is the simple single retainer. So this would be a single job or service defined and repeatable monthly. So again, this would be something like SEO. We know it's going to be just a single item. We have those number of hours. Probably you may not even need to speak with a client about the anything kind of changing in there, because nothing really is changing. It's always going to be that. You're always going to work 10 hours on it every single month. And it, again, super simple. And so we'll show you that as well. And you're going to just be able to invoice off of this job every single month, close it out at the end of the year, and start it again. And then the simple with a monthly breakout. So it's very similar to the single, the simple single, but we're going to break it out in a different way that's going to allow for different reporting for you. Again, so this is why that end goal is always super important, because we can set things up in different ways depending on what your reporting needs are actually going to be. Again, we're going to show you kind of some of those differences in how they look, so that you are going to be able to decide what works best for yourselves. And of course, just the amount of maintenance that you maybe want to put into these pieces of work every single month. Now, as we go through some of these little bits of presentation today, I do have Jimmy Woo. Again, he's answering questions in the back end. You're going to see your questions box on your GoToWebinar panel over on probably the right-hand side of your screen. So feel free to shoot him any questions as we're going through. However, I do recognize that after some of these, you know, you've processed, you're now maybe trying to build out some of these retainers directly within your system, and you get stuck. So if you have any additional questions, never hesitate to reach out to our success team at success@functionpoint.com. This goes directly into our joint inbox, and you'll have access to the entire team to be able to help and support you as you're going through that. So yeah, please reach out to us with any of your questions. We are always happy to help, because we want to make sure you are successful within Function Point. Now, before we dive in, Jimmy, I just want to check in. Are there any questions that have come in, again, just around some of those definitions that maybe we should clarify before we jump into the system itself?
No, I don't see any questions thus far. I think everyone's just excited to see the visual right now.
Okay, great. Glad to hear it. Whoop. So as we go into Function Point itself, what is super important for us to make sure that we start with is actually how we set up to get us started. And a huge part of that is in that initial setup. So obviously that is underneath here, and we're going to go ahead and add estimates. So again, everyone that's on this webinar, I suspect that most of you have been with Function Point for a little bit. So I'm not going to go through all of the nitty gritty of actually creating a lot of these details today, just because of the fact that, again, you should be up to date on how to create an estimate. Again, if you get stuck though, never hesitate to reach out to the success team. But I am going to, however, point out a few key pieces so that when you are building your original estimate, what it's going to allow you to do is actually categorize these different pieces of work as a retainer, so that as you go through your workflow with all of your retainers, it's easy for you to be able to go through and pull up all your retainers, again, especially for invoicing, because when we finish off today, I am going to show you how to just be able to create a batch invoice, which is going to make your accountant's life so easy, and they will love you. So always an important thing to make sure that your accountant is on board. So when you're creating your estimate, I usually recommend really utilizing this category item here, because in here, what I always recommend is utilizing this dropdown to define how you're going to invoice work later. So in my demo system, what I have set up here is our monthly retainer, time material, fixed price, and quarterly retainer. So what we utilize mostly is these monthly retainers and these quarterly retainers when it comes to a retainer work. Again, it helps you differentiate so that at the end of every quarter, your accountant's going to be able to come in, they're going to be able to do a job search for all of your quarterly retainers, and they're going to be able to invoice easily. Same again for at the end or beginning of every month, depending on your billing cycle, to be able to pull up all of your monthly retainers and invoice accordingly. Time material, fixed price, again, these are pretty self-explanatory, just depends on your agreement with your client. Fixed price, though, that is more of that topic I was talking about earlier of a set amount for a specific job, though, right? Different than a retainer. So I would highly recommend, if some of you are not already defining these as you are building out your estimates, you should start doing it. Utilize this category field. If some of you don't have the category field available, you've been utilizing it for something else in your workflow, there are a couple of other fields that you can utilize. I have had other agencies utilize the estimate type as an option. However, usually we do recommend this being more the type of work. But if you need to make sure that you have that retainer in there somewhere, I have seen this utilized. And then of course, this work type is another one that can also be used too. If you don't have work type in your system, that can actually just be found through the admin section, system setup and system preferences. They're just kind of hidden by default, but you can easily access those and turn them on so that they're available. Again, my best practice is utilize the category, but if, again, there is something in your workflow already utilizing that, these are two other really good options. But feel free to reach out again to your success manager, and we're here to make sure that that is super easy for you. So to get us started, I'm going to dive into some of our simple retainers. So I'm going to show you the initial one that is the simplest of simple. I've got my Mac and Co SEO retainer. So this is diving into, again, that very simple option. We're going to go into our job 30333. And then where my favorite spot to be able to see on where our agreement is actually coming underneath here in financials. So this is, again, a really perfect example of our monthly retainer that we have with Mac & Co for any SEO work that we are doing with them. We're automatically going to estimate a 20 hours, because what we want to do when we're building out this work is it's still on a monthly basis, because what we're trying to remember is that it's still 20 hours per month that is our goal to hit that. 20 hours totaling $2,000 that we're going to invoice them for at whatever point in our billing cycle that we need to. Now, when you're having this single job is actually going to stay open for the entire year for yourselves, because what that allows is for you to continue to just use this one single job. You're going to track against it the entire year, making it very easy for your staff to know that this is always going to be their job for Mac & Co SEO retainer. They're going to be able to come in, track their time against a single item. It does make things quite easy, as well as your accountant's going to be able to come in and invoice based off of their estimated amount every single month, allowing, again, for you to continue to track directly against a single job. Now, that is great. However, the only thing that can kind of come up with that is, again, thinking about that end goal, always come back to that item, is the fact that, okay, so we are tracking against this one job, which is great. But now that we're past month one, we're seeing that some of these numbers are starting to go way over that 20 hours. Because now imagine we're 6 months in, and we've got 120 hours tracked against this. We obviously know that not all of that is just for the month of July or whatever month it was that we maybe started this agreement in. So for that, you do, again, have some of that reporting capability directly on this page for yourself to be able to review and potentially revise any of these jobs or retainers that you have. So you would be able to expand this and be able to look at where your hours currently are at, what has been billed for so far, because as of course you track time, you will start to build for those timesheets that are against it. So you can do the review directly this way, or you can actually start filtering up here to be able to look at specific timeframes on if it was that time or a different one where you were maybe profitable, where you went over. So what I know I want to do is actually just take a look at this month. So I can define by July 1 to July 29th, because I am now remembering it is July, and I can go ahead and filter by the date. So what we're going to see in this, though, is actually like, oh, you know what? For the month of July, we definitely went over. We had estimated 20 hours. That is all that the customer is going to pay us for, because that was our agreement. However, we went over by an additional 20 hours. So we already know now that this month was not profitable for us for this retainer. Because again, as we go through, we see that the cost associated with this 40 hours is $1,200. The actuals of what you could have billed for if you had done this as a time material is $4,000, creating that variance of a negative $2,000. However, we did invoice for $2,000, so it did make us just net neutral on this. So that is what we then are able to view in here. Again, if we did want to go back to the month of June, and we're going to filter by that date, you can see no time was tracked during this time. So again, 20 hours, break it down by the actuals, where that variance is, what had been invoiced. But of course, this was created in the month of July. So now moving forward, we're going to want to continue to monitor this to make sure that we're not going over every single month and utilizing these dates to be able to do that. Great. Jimmy, I do see that question mark popping up quite a bit. Any questions on this that we should tackle before we go into a different way of breaking out one of these simple retainers?
Yeah, I do have a question. So the question is from other solutions I did use because I had to. What about creating a service group? So I have a single job, but different service groups for every month of the retainer. Would that potentially work? So where the yellow line says retainer services, that can be January, and then another service group of February with SEO within it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know what? Great question. That definitely can be a solution. The only reason I personally always suggest not doing that is because we can't lock in these services. So just depending on how many staff you have that would be tracking against these items, they could track it against the incorrect service, which then could give you incorrect reporting later on. So that is why I tend to steer clear from that. What I'm actually going to show you coming up next is breaking each of those, instead of by the individual service groups, we're actually going to break it out per month so that it helps avoid that I guess gray area for your staff to know where they need to track. Now, of course, if you are utilizing our schedules and tasking, that is definitely something that may be able to help with that. If you know that every single month you're going to, again, we're going to have that service group. We could set up a schedule that would have a single task for your staff attached to each individual service within each service group. They would be able to close out that task, and by utilizing our dependencies, they could then trigger the next task for the next month. And since those are connected to the correct services, it would track against the correct services. So it really just depends on how you're utilizing Function Point. If you are using schedules and tasks, then that could definitely be a solution. But if your way is more around tracking directly to the job and the service, I just find it leaves a little bit too much space for human error. Jimmy, anything that you would add? I know you tend to talk about these sorts of things with a lot of people too.
Yeah, I think a couple other questions came in, and it sounds like a little similar. So I believe if we go into the other retainer example you were going to go into with this separate job per month, that may clarify a number of things for them.
Okay, great. So let's dive into that then. So what you're going to notice is that when I first came to find this job, I had hovered over jobs and view job to then find it. Again, just for a little bit of navigation, I'm sure everyone's familiar with this. As you hover over this find job, it's going to just pull up your most recently looked at jobs. However, because I want to show you this more at the project level, we're going to go at the project. I'm going to view project, and then I've got my North Shore SSM retainer. So in here, I'm going to come back underneath that job financials because now you're going to see how this has been broken out. So again, it kind of feeds back to that question on if we could utilize this against the different service group levels. But what I've done here is I've utilized this at a different job level. So each of these jobs are going to have different job numbers, but they're still sticking with the same name, but then defining by each month which month this retainer is in. So as we go through this, we can then expand each of these months. You're also going to notice that this does include a little bit of different, quite a few more services that they are providing to their client. Still that 20 hours at $2,400 that we plan on invoicing every month, but we've now defined the number of hours going into each piece of the retainer, as well as some of our external expenses that we would be charging back to the client. So again, within here, we're going to be able to see that totaling of the 20 hours, $2,400. We actually did go over by 4 hours with our actuals, see that cost, see those actuals, and then of course that final invoiced amount as well. Now it looks like we did do a little bit of manipulation within these invoiced amounts here. But again, where we're really going to be concentrating now is within this reporting and seeing how every single month over month is. So we know that within January and February, again, we had gone over for the month of January. However, within February, we're actually 3 hours under. So it was a pretty good month for us with this. Now, as we go into March, April, and May, we don't have any actuals against this, but we are going to see again that with that invoice, we were invoicing that agreed upon $2,400 and seeing again where we were profitable or not. But what we're in now is into the month of July, so we would be able to begin tracking time directly against these as we go. So this removes this need to define by these start and end dates like we had to do with that simple retainer previously, and it allows you to be able again to see each of these jobs as a whole on how this retainer was in a single glance for yourself. Again, a really great benefit that comes from doing this breakout as well is in regards to reporting later on. If you're looking at any profitability reports and you're wanting to define by specific months, you would be able to filter by those dates, and it would make sure that it only includes the work that was done within that time. The other simple retainer does also allow for that too, depending on what kind of date filters you're using. But the previous retainer setup does require you to utilize the activity date field, where this one would be able to pull based off of, say, an invoice date or delivery date as well. So there is quite a few benefits to each. You know, I've had feedback from customers in the past saying this is really cumbersome to have to create every single month. However, what I recommend with this is you can create this just at the beginning of the year, have every single month already pre-broken out for you so that you can have it as a view. And what you want to do is utilize your different job statuses to know where everything is, because now we're going to come back to that question or my statement earlier of, you know, you would have the human error aspects of people tracking against the wrong spot. And I'm sure a lot of you are like, Sophie, like, you're crazy. This is still allowing for people to track against the incorrect jobs. But what you can do, again, utilizing these statuses as you create invoices for all of these, you would create final invoices, which is going to lock those jobs. And then anything that's futuristic, put it in a state of hold and make sure that that hold status has an alias of closed, because then these jobs won't open up unless you have come in and actually changed that status. So for the month of July, I know I would be able to come in here, create a final invoice against this, which would then change this status automatically for me to invoice. And then you would be able to come into your August one. You know what, since we're at the end of the month and we know that we're about to get started on this next month and I'm going to be doing all my billing this afternoon, I can come in here, change this from on hold to open. And now this job is actually going to become active for people to be able to search for and track their time against. Jimmy, I'm sure you got an influx of questions towards all of these. Anything that I can help answer directly on the screen?
Yes, so there's a few questions around. So in the North Shore retainer you just showed, where it's broken down month by month per job, how would you manage the task and the schedule that might be outlined for throughout the year?
Yes, so another great question. So when it comes to the job and scheduling within Function Point, it is still a one-to-one relationship between a job and a schedule. So you won't be able to have a single schedule for this entire retainer unless you're using the previous simple one, which was a single job. So similar to how I had just gone through with the jobs and opened that upcoming month's job, you would then need to go into the schedule itself as well and assign the first task. Again, we'd probably need to be looking at your schedule and see if we're needing to assign all tasks immediately, or if you have dependency set up and just need to start by activating the first one that will trigger that water flow or waterfall. But that would be how you would best use that. Also, what we can do when you are originally setting up a lot of these jobs is we can create you templates that already have schedules a part of that as well, so that the first one could already be in an assigned state. So when you open that job, it should trigger that as well. So again, it could use just a little bit of work between us to find what works best for you. But the simplest way is that as you come into the August retainer and you open that, go into the schedule and assign that first task. Jimmy,
So I just want to clarify one thing for everyone right now. In Sophia's system, you're looking at project and jobs. It may be possible that your system's terminology may be different, like campaign job or campaign docket. So just keep that in mind. For today's purposes, we are calling it projects and jobs.
Yes, good point, Jimmy. And also just an FYI for everyone else, if you are utilizing any of our help documentation through our help center, we do, again, use this terminology of project estimates and jobs. But a lot of agencies I work with, they actually define these as like campaigns, SOWs, and projects here. I've also seen with schedules, people using timelines too. So depending on your terminology, your system could look different. But however, this main navigation bar, the positioning of all of these is always the same. So you'll definitely be able to tell if this says campaigns here, it is projects as you're looking in my system.
So Sophia, another question is it possible if you could click into one of these retainer jobs and create a schedule in it and see how that duplicates to the other ones?
How that duplicates to the other ones.
Just to see if how that schedule would look like on a month-to-month basis for these jobs.
So that definitely gets a little bit more into, so I don't have a schedule already against this, so we are veering off a little bit. But if you needed to create a schedule for, say, the July one, or you know what, let's actually, I'm gonna backtrack there. We're gonna go into our August. So again, in most cases, you would probably already have the schedule pre-made. So when you come into your August retainer, you would be able to open it. You would probably already have that schedule made. You'd be able to trigger it. But in this case, you could come in, add new, add schedule. I'm gonna just use what our current estimate services are as our template. I'm gonna click submit. Again, if you already have a template schedule available though, you would be able to choose it at that point. In here, you're gonna see your SEO. I know that we're gonna assign this to Jimmy. Jimmy's gonna do that today. And we know that it's gonna be needing to be done by the end of August. And then we can go ahead and assign that to him with his 10 hours that we know that we're gonna be giving him. So we can then save those changes. Again, we can do that throughout the rest of them as well. Maybe I will give this one to myself for the SCM management, and then for the social media, I'm going to actually give that to Beth. Within here, everything has automatically assigned. You're gonna see that I only gave Jimmy the one due date, but I'm gonna go into my Gantt view, which is a little bit easier for me to utilize, and I'm gonna set these dates right here for August 31st. However, everyone has the entire month of August to make sure that they complete this. So I'm just gonna drag this all the way out. The 17th here to the 31st. We're gonna do that with all of them there. Because this again is a retainer, probably these are tasks that are going to be lasting over the entire year, and we don't have dependencies on some of these. It would probably be more in our robust retainer where you would actually build out like a proper timeline because of the fact that it is a separate job from what we are billing for. Jimmy, is that clear enough for that question that you had there?
I believe so. I guess one of the things I'd like to clarify as well is if your monthly retainer has all the same deliverables and same tasks that you already know that you need to do, when you set up the first month of the retainer with the schedule, once you duplicate it to the other months, all of these tasks in your schedule can be duplicated over at the same time as well. So it just makes that initial setup much faster.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah.
So with something like that, again, if we were to come back into the job details, we have that schedule attached there now. If you navigated back to the original estimate, you would then be able to copy this estimate and it's going to pull everything all at once. So you'll be able to copy this, and then again with that SMM retainer, you could then redefine it for September. I'm like, what month comes after August? There we go. For your September retainer coming up. So again, if you do that all at the beginning of the year, it's all set up for your entire 12 months and everything should be pretty seamless moving through it after.
Another question is, when would you use, in what scenario would you recommend using the North Shore retainer where we break down month to month into a separate job versus the Mac & Co. SEO retainer at the very beginning where it's just ongoing indefinitely?
Yeah, great question. So again, that comes back to a lot of that reporting. There are huge benefits of having this broken out per retainer because, sorry, in a project per job, because of the fact that you're going to be able to see immediately if you're going over or under that month without needing to filter by the activity dates. We have, I really hate when things start flashing red at me because I'm going over, and there are some BI visuals that if you have retainers set up in that single way that are there's a guarantee it's going to go over from the estimated amount, because the estimated amount is what your monthly amount is to make for easy invoicing. But your actuals are always going to be over it because we're now like 6 months down the line, and therefore it's going to show that based off of what you had estimated for, you are drastically over that. So it's really for some reporting purposes. I know that it can cause a bit of I would maybe say like cramp in the side. Like it's not a huge pain point, but it can cause some irritation. So if you're willing to put in the work, this is quite a bit better just for reporting purposes. Anything that you would
I'll
add,
fit
Jimmy?
one more question. Actually, the one more question. We create different jobs, which may include 3 months of retainer hours or less. Curious, what would be the correct way of managing that inside Function Point? I feel like that is the safe way. The robust retainer, I think you're about to talk about.
Exactly, yeah. So if there's nothing else just in regards to the simple retainers, then I'm going to move on to how we utilize Function Point to actually build some of those robust retainers. Again, the robust retainers are more of that scenario where it is, again, potentially 70 hours or whatever your agreement is, but we really have no idea what kind of work that they're going to be requesting throughout that month or year for that work. So again, I already have this preset up. This is a good one that, again, is good to keep within a project. Again, anytime you suspect that there's going to be one or more jobs associated with something, keep it within a project because it just allows for really easy organization. Again, anyone that has ever talked to me, I'm a bit of an organization freak, and I am just a huge advocate for projects. So I've got my Safeway retainer here already set up. And when we come into this, I'm gonna click into jobs first, and then I'm gonna show you the breakout immediately after. So within how we define these, we have the Safeway monthly retainer. And this is, again, where you're gonna define those number of hours that are associated with that retainer. And this is gonna be the job that you are going to quote unquote bill for every single month. However, it's going to be these 3 jobs underneath it that are completely different deliverables that you could be working on it could be maybe specifically for that month. It could actually even expand over multiple months. But really what our goal is to track the number of hours against those jobs so that we can see, again, where that profitability is that feeds into what you're billing for retainers. So my favorite page, again, when it comes to a lot of these things, is this job financials page. And this is where we're going to be able to see, again, that profitability. So within that Safeway monthly retainer, we have come in and we've actually, we have given it a few items because this is what we do expect to be billing against. However, I have worked with a lot of agencies where it's just a single line item here. It could be just that 90 hours against retainer agreement. Keep it simple. And you're going to notice that this is never going to be the job that people track time to. This is just where you have that estimated amount for you here of that 90 hours at $10,000 a month that you know you're going to be invoicing for. It is then the following jobs underneath where you're going to be able to see where those actuals are. So with that Safeway entrance sign, we know that this is going to be a part of that retainer. Whatever hours we put into that are coming out of these dollar amounts that we're going to be invoicing for. But this is where we can now see that breakout of the actuals, what that cost was, and then the actual billables as well. But again, you're not going to see any invoicing starting to build here. So a huge line that you're going to want to be following is what this total line is. So again, 90 hours, we can see with the actuals that we're 136 hours. So we're already over by 46 hours as well at this point now too. You're gonna be able to see that cost. Yeah, every little bit of breakout here. Now this feeds back again into the kind of that simple retainer again, where because these jobs could be going over different months or spanning over a different time frame, it could be that some of these hours are for a single month, and actually we are still quite profitable with it. So we would want to again do that filter. I'm going to look at where we're at for this month already, filter by that date. And it looks like we're actually doing pretty well for the month of July. Again, we had that agreed upon 90 hours, but we're already at the 29th and we've only hit 24 hours for it. So we actually are doing quite well for the month of July. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the month of June. We're going to filter by that date. And we can see that it was actually June where we ended up putting in quite a few more hours for a lot of this work and putting us over what our retainer is. So with that in mind, again, it'll definitely balance itself out by the end of the year, it looks like, with the number of hours we're putting in June versus what has been put in July. But it is still utilizing these filtering dates to be able to see how we are doing month over month. Also with these, as these different pieces of work are completed, you would be closing them out so that as other pieces of work are added in, you would be tracking against all of these and you would be able to see it all as a total. Now, this does kind of lead me into a couple of other points. There have been some agencies that I have worked with that they're like, well, I still want to define the number of hours I would expect them to put towards like the Safeway entrance sign, for example. I want to be able to define this. So then this kind of makes this total line down here irrelevant because we can't do this comparison because month by month, we know that our goal is 90 hours to hit, but now it is sort of making some adjustments there. So with a case like that, what I recommend is just make sure that this monthly retainer is always your first job at the very top so that you just need to look at this line and then transition to this line to look at. I know it is a little bit, again, a cramp in the side, but it is kind of one of those concessions you need to make if you still want to be defining how much time is going to be put into all of these different deliverables that could be associated with the retainer. All right, Jimmy, again, I'm seeing those questions coming in fast and furious. Anything that we should be tackling on screen right now?
Yes, actually, I like this question. Not that I like all.
I was about to be like, don't you like all the questions, Jimmy? Come
on. I've actually never thought about this myself, so that's why I thought it was very intriguing.
Were you about to stump me? Goodness. Okay.
No, I don't think so. So in the case, maybe if the agency realized halfway through the retainer, maybe they started off as a simple retainer and then 6 months into the 1-year retainer, they've realized, oh, hey, we might need to transition into more of a robust retainer module.
Mm.
So curious, is that possible, and like how you would manage that scenario?
Hmm, good question. Ooh, trying to think, how would I best manage that? Again, I would probably have about 20 questions for you, deciding on what the best way to go about. Uh, but maybe just like off the top of my head, a good way to do that, we could maybe just rename that previous simple retainer. And if this is the case of, again, that single super simple retainer that we had done at the very start, store that again underneath a project, and define like maybe the months that that was associated to. If we know it's from January to June for that first 6 months of the year. And then for the second one, we would then start that billing retainer for yourself that would be for those remaining months. And you would want to close that previous simple retainer and open up a new one. And then again, keep it all within that project so you can see where your financials are at for the entire year, and then have those different time tracking jobs underneath it for some of those more robust scenarios. Jimmy, is
Cool.
there anything that you would maybe add?
I was thinking if we had a simple retainer, if the retainer was based on, say, the Mac and Co. SEO retainer, the single job indefinite, open indefinitely, if we could maybe, what if we just create the project, attach that simple retainer into that project, and then start having the deliverables similar to this one. So really you got that Mac and the first line would be the Mac and Co. SEO retainer we saw earlier, and then
Mm-hmm.
tracking the monthly the different deliverables afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
Could that
Yeah.
be a possibility?
Yeah, that would definitely be a possibility as well. The only reason that may cause a pain point would be in regards to the actuals that are already tracked against it. I would also maybe worry about some of your staff being conditioned to continuing to track against that one, where in this case, since it's turning
Mhm.
robust, you're wanting them to track against these time tracking jobs instead. So again, it's this would be why I would have probably 20 to 30 questions for the individual on if this is the best call for your agency, so that we can just make sure it's set up correctly. But I think both of, yes, you're definitely right, Jimmy. I think that would be a solution, but just a couple other things to think about as you go through it.
Okay. So the other question is also a little bit more of a mix. So what if the retainer has recurring deliverables similar to a simple retainer, but then we also have uh, deliverables that you have like this entrance sign redesign as well. So could you mix the two models together? So where the recurring, they track against the Safeway monthly retainer line, and then actual deliverables where they need to manage as a separate job be tracked against those jobs instead.
Yeah, definitely. Again, this could be connected to, and maybe this is set up well for this actually, where with this monthly retainer, the retainer services, that is, say, the 25 hours that's associated with all the below jobs, but we know that there's X number of hours still with these repeatable services that we would track against. So yeah, your staff could definitely come in and track time against this. Again, this would really be where your internal management comes in handy, though, to make sure people know where they need to be tracking so that you have accurate reporting later. But yes, I think that would definitely be possible.
Okay, great. So one other question was for tasks. So let's say we're through for the retainer, what happens when a task that's not on the original retainer schedule comes up? How would you assign that so that it's tracked, the time is tracked against the job properly?
Yeah, definitely. For something like that, you would probably want to go back to your original schedule and just add in a task for that. However, if it's something simple and maybe you don't already have a schedule pre-set up, you can even just come in just directly underneath that job itself. You've got an easy plus button over here, which is just going to be able to help you add in a quick task and send it off and assign it to an individual that maybe needs to know about this copywriting and editing, who isn't already just actively working on it, and you want to make sure that they know that they need to be associated to this without getting up, walking over there and having that conversation. conversation to know which job they need to be working on. So within this, you would be able to define that task title, the description on what they need to do, again, that due date. And then if there is already a schedule, you can associate it directly with that schedule as well. It just really depends on where in that workflow you're at when it comes to that retainer.
Another question that popped up is when we create a separate job under that retainer, let's say for retainer example earlier, the the dashboard reports will show these jobs as over budget, as there is it's a $0 estimate. So the question is there anything we can do to avoid that, or how can we look at that?
Yeah, again, so this kind of comes back to that statement here around wanting to still estimate for the hours per each of these time tracking jobs. So to avoid that, you would need to be able to put in those hours so that you can see how you actually are doing time tracking wise in a lot of your BI visuals. However, again, it'll just throw off this kind of initial page, but you still have that ability of seeing what those overall hours are and comparing them to what the total actual hours are. So that would be the solution for a lot of those BI visuals. Jimmy, have you found any other solutions that maybe I'm just not thinking of that you would want to add?
Actually, I don't. I was very curious about the answer to that question as well. So thank you. I learned something new myself.
Oh, well, I don't get to do that to you very often, so I'm going to take that as a win. Okay, great. Awesome. Any other questions you want to tackle, Jimmy? We only have about 9 minutes left, and I know we tried to, well, usually end this 5 minutes ago, but I do want to quickly just show everyone how to be able to enable your accountant to be able to pull up a list of all your retainers every month and easily invoice for them. So unless there's any other questions that you want to throw in here, Jim?
No questions thus far. So.
Okay, excellent. So again, that thought process that we had at the very start of how do we continue to think about the end goal? And a huge one is invoicing, because we want to make sure that we're getting our money for all this work that we're doing. So remember when we first started and we had built out that estimate and we utilized that category field, what I'm able to do now is come in and do a job find. And what I'm going to do is come over here to that category field, and I'm actually going to pull up just all of my jobs that are in the category of monthly retainer, because it's at the end of the month and I'm wanting to do all of my invoicing for next month already to get those invoices out there before we get started on all those work. So I'm going to define that. I'm going to filter by that monthly retainer. Again, depending on how you like to define these things, could be monthly retainer, it could just be retainer, it could be quarterly retainer, so completely up to yourselves. I'm going to click by Find Active. So I'm sure a lot of you have noticed there's a Find Active button versus a Find Jobs button. The Find Active just allows us to make sure that it's only active ones you're going to pull and not too many others. So when we come in here, I already have 5 jobs in here that are on a monthly retainer structure. I know I'm going to invoice just by the estimated amount for all of these. And what you're going to see is this Add Invoice button up here. And what this is going to do is we're going to create interim invoices for all of these. The batch name is by default going to just pull today's date, but we can redefine this by being like monthly retainer agreement. And of course, the moment people are watching me, I can't spell anymore, for August. The invoice date, I'm actually going to forward this because I'm just really preparing myself ahead of time right now. But this is going to be for an August 1 invoice execution, I guess you could say. We're going to calculate from the estimated because we'd already defined the number of hours and what we are invoicing our customer for every single month throughout these retainers. We're going to go ahead and add a batch invoice. If your system's set up correctly, a lot of this should already be done for you if there's any taxes or anything. But of course, if you need to add in any payment notes, just like a nice little thank you or a description that would go with each of these invoices, you have that capability. The next is to actually go ahead and add the individual jobs to all these batches, to the batch invoice, I mean. And again, you're gonna see all 5 of your monthly retainers here. Maybe, I don't know why, you wanna add them all individually. If you have more than 5 in here, that could be quite annoying clicking on each of them, but you can go ahead and just click add all. We're gonna wanna include all jobs. We're going to pull all of them in. Again, we know they're all invoicing based off of estimated amounts, so that invoiced amount is going to pull that as well. Again, normally in a retainer, there's probably not a lot of editing needing to be done in here, but if for some crazy reason you need to do that, you do have the capability of coming in and editing that specific invoice to reflect what it is that you're going to need. But again, just as simple as finishing adding that batch, you're now going to have this invoice of 147. When you do a batch invoice, what this has created is single invoices against multiple jobs. So they are all individual, but it's going to just start by popping up the first one that was in that list that you would then be able to review those services. However, if you want to see all of the different invoices within that batch, you can come in and review them here. And then if you are also utilizing our integration with QuickBooks, you can post this invoice and you'll be able to see the status of all of them going over into QuickBooks for yourself. Again, the yellow is unposted, green would say that it is posted, and if it's red, probably there is maybe just some kind of error, and you may need to go into that invoice specifically just to edit and make sure that it is mapped correctly. Also, for anyone utilizing Function Point for notifying your clients directly through here, again, making sure that there is an estimate contact against that original estimate so that we already have those emails available, and you're going to be able to see in here as well who you're going to be able to notify by using that Notify Client button. So, should be pretty simple, and as you can see, instead of clicking into each individual job, we have made your accountant's job quite a little bit more efficient for themselves by being able to create all 5 of these at the exact same time and be able to do a review, post, and notify all within a single page. So I personally find our batch invoicing pretty useful, especially for retainers. Okay, I think I spoke really quickly because I know, again, we're coming to the top of the hour. Jimmy, questions, concerns, anything else we should be adding in before we try and wrap this up and let everyone get back to their Wednesday?
No, I think no, I think we went through all the questions. I was able to answer some of them as you were speaking. So no, I think we're right on track, Sophia.
Okay, excellent. Again, everyone, this was really everything I wanted to make sure we touched on today. I know we didn't go through the actual creation of a lot of these estimates. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to the success team. We do want to make sure that these are done correctly for you. You know, everyone tends to have unique agreements with their clients, so I totally get it. If you're going to bring me a question, though, probably be ready for 30 more after, because I tend to do that when I'm chatting with people. So yeah, I'm really excited to hear from anyone. Any other questions? If you are still throwing a few more into the queue now, if Jimmy is unable to get to all of them in the next few minutes, we will also organize having a success member reach out to you. But again, if middle of the night tonight you have an aha moment and you have a question, don't hesitate to reach out. Yeah, it's been really great having you all with me today. Jimmy, thank you for being a fabulous co-pilot. I really enjoyed having you throw some of those dingers at me as we went through.
No problem.
Super fun. And yeah, I guess
I'll just make one last comment.
please.
So for everyone, this is being recorded. So tomorrow morning, we will be sending out the slide deck and also sharing the recording link for everyone. So you can share with others, or if you want to go back and review it.
Yes. Thank you for the reminder on that one, Jimmy. I really appreciate it.
No problem.
Okay,
All right. Thank you,
great.
Sophie.
Well, then on that note, thanks everyone, and we'll talk to you again we will be launching another webinar as well, which you should be notified of too. So hopefully you join us then. Thanks, guys.